So good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your beautiful hot summer day to be here with us. And for anybody who hasn't gotten a chance to meet me yet, my name is Reed Starwind. I'm working on this project here called Stories Invincible, transformative narratives from the City of Camden. I'm working here in partnership with the Center for Cooperative Media from way up in Montclair State University. And I'm joined today by my two wonderful coworkers. To my side here is Joe. Joe is, you always need a Joe. Because Joe's the guy who's going to find a problem, he's going to fix it, he's the dude in the chair, wonderful.
Spring napkins, that's it.
That's, yes, very hot, man. Two ways. And to my side is the ever lovely Cassandra, who just brings a nice sense of gravity and charm to everything that we do. So super thankful to be working with the both of them. This is like one of the best jobs I've ever had before. And we have an opportunity to do something really cool here. So you've been working with the center longer than me. Can you tell them a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So as we said, my name is Cassandra Etienne. Welcome everybody. I'm so glad for everyone who's come to join us today to talk about the Stories Invincible project. I am the Assistant Director for Programming and Membership at the Center for Cooperative Media. And I'm just gonna, do some place setting to talk about our work at the center and situate Stories Invincible within context of that work. So the center was founded in 2012 to address basically a lot of shifts in the media landscape, a lot of newsroom closures, a lot of journalists and media makers losing their jobs and livelihood, a lot of consolidation. So many shifts. So the Center for Cooperative Media has stepped in to shore up and strengthen New Jersey's local news ecosystem. And what does that mean? Well, we have a number of different programs and initiatives that we put on at the center, including our flagship program, which is the New Jersey News Commons. It's a community of some 280 plus at last count, but we've since relaunched the New Jersey News Commons to welcome more voices and more people to the table. And this community is for journalists, trained journalists, but also media makers from around the state. And we've expanded the membership to welcome stakeholders. So you don't have to be, a storyteller or a journalist, but you're passionate, aggravated by what to have you concerned about the state of local news in New Jersey, then you're welcome to be part of the Center for Cooperative Media's, the New Jersey News Commons as well. There's a lot more that we do. I'll bring it back to South Jersey. We have two sister projects essentially. The South Jersey Information Equity Project, which focuses on equity and improving the quality and the quantity of news produced by and for communities of color in South Jersey, and with focus on Camden, Burlington, and Gloucester counties. And we have 4 fellows who are doing reporting in the community this summer. So that's our first cohort for this project. And then, so it's kind of like doubling down on our efforts in Camden is the Stories Invincible initiative, which is headed by Reed. And I'm proud to help his efforts in developing this program. And so, what else about the center? I should tell you that, so yes, I should have said at the top that we're a small grant-funded program at Montclair State University, as we said. We were able to put on or to provide this grant opportunity, which helps to tell restorative narratives and address information needs in Camden through generous support from, and I want to read this because I want to make sure I get it right.
We put the screen behind her.
So Stories Invincible is supported by a sub-grant from the Community Info Coop in partnership with the Movement Alliance Project, thanks to original funding from the Geraldine R Foundation and the New Jersey Local News Fund, a partnership between Dodge, Democracy Fund, and the Community Foundation of New Jersey. And we have Simon here with us from the Community Info Co-op.
Sure. Hi all. My name is Simon Galperin. I'm the director of the Community Info Co-op. I'm just going to stand up so I don't have to pivot around this pole. Really wonderful to be able to support developing this program. This is part of our Just Transition work, where we're trying to get resources to the people so they could decide how they want the news and media to work for them. So I'm really excited to be doing this with y'all and to be back in Camden, hearing and learning from you, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Simon. So yeah, special thanks again to Community Info Coop and also Free Press. Vanessa Maria Graver is here. You'll be hearing from her very soon about giving more information about the not the application process, but I'm sorry, like restorative narratives and the info needs. And also, shout out to Michael Scoli, who's also here from Free Press. Thank you for joining us. So we appreciate your support in helping us bring the funding together for this project. And
that was just introducing ourselves. Okay. So when they had reached out to me, one of the first things that they had mentioned was the fact that they'd already seen success with similar projects up in Atlantic City and up in Newark, appropriately titled Stories of Atlantic City and Stories of Newark.
Newark Peer Learning and Collaboration Fund. It was our first naming convention. It's a sucky name, but it worked out okay.
And so there was a recognized need for the fact that in Camden, New Jersey, media, as a media outlet, it's kind of inconsistent. There are many different voices and many different hands in the pie. So we can't always necessarily get the right messages out to the people. I witnessed this personally back in 2020. In the wake of the George Floyd police killing, Camden City had put together a quote-unquote protest that had marched down, I believe it's Mount Ephraim Avenue and Kane Avenue before merging over to in front of the Camden County Police Department, just up the street. The thing about the protest was it was really more so a photo op. It was super commodified by local media and by the politicians. And for a city of people that really wanted to raise their voice and feel heard because they're afraid and facing the same kind of troubles as the environment that spawned a situation like George Floyd, they wanted something a little bit more than the local politicians saying, hey, our job is hard, we're trying to do better, and an ice cream truck and photos with the cops. It really didn't satisfy the spirit of what people were feeling in the moment. So myself, along with a few really good friends, we organized what we call Camden Arts for Change, and that was just our way of taking the narrative back for ourselves. And what we were blessed with during that day, when we had put in our call for volunteers for the movement, we had photographers, we had videographers, and we had writers and journalists there to help capture the moment. So it was no longer able to be a story that went viral. I remember after the original Camden protest happened, there are people posting in California, Canada, and all over the place saying, oh wow, Camden, New Jersey, the worst place in the world, can figure out police violence, then maybe we all can too. And it was just really our chance to say, no, the conversation is a lot more nuanced, pun not fully intended. The conversation is a lot more nuanced and has a lot more, and shout out to Rosemarie for hosting us here in Nuanced Cafe. But the it's perfect. Yeah. We got good chemistry. Absolutely, 100%. Within the notes. All of that said, and you can see these, whoever can see these photos here. These photos are from our movement. That's Watsumoja President Yinde Merrill on the couch and in this photo up there, speaking to the people with the megaphone. That's resident artist Nisha Smith-Johnson, aka Soul Child, there in front of the people. And there's another person who came out to our protest when we had our kneels with our fists raised in front of the police department to close out the day. And so because I understand how things like this work, I've been a part of it, I was reached out to create an initiative here in Camden, but because we're not in Atlantic City or Newark, and because Stories of Camden for me personally sounded kind of plain, I wanted to tap into Camden's identity by calling it Stories Invincible. In spite of everything that Camden's been through, it remains this city that has so much hope, so much pride, so much heart and love here, that you just don't really get to hear about that often because they just want to sell it as a bad place to be. It's much easier to paint somebody as a bad guy and watch them get beat up on than it is to uplift somebody and help them get where they need to go. So you apply that times a few dozen thousand, you have the city of Camden, people that want to be heard and want to be seen and want to be properly represented. And so this is our way of empowering the people to go and represent themselves. We've got some wonderful funding, we've got amazing resources, and a strong track record of creating successful storytelling initiatives. There's a laser pointer on this thing. I just got this. So yeah, that is a little. Does anybody have any questions so far about anything that we've said to you? For the most part, so good. Good name.
Stories Meant to Be.
Oh, like the name. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Nice.
Appreciate it. Okay, so next up in the slideshow
You know, like
is.
peer learning and collaboration fund for Newark, that's not the catchiest one, okay?
That turned into the Newark News and Story
Yes, it
Collaborative.
did, yeah.
I like that one better. It's got some alliteration
Newark
going.
News and
Story, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Newark Stories on Twitter.
Newark Story. All right.
It's Newark Stories on Twitter,
Newark Stories
which
on
maybe
Twitter.
should be the.
I mean, it's an idea.
Yeah.
It's cool. Well, we're in the Invincible bag right now, so we'll
I'm into
tap
it,
that
I'm into it, I'm into
today. But Vanessa, I did just hear your voice a moment ago. Would you like to step in and share what Camden's info needs?
Thank you.
Yes. You might have to help me out with that.
Absolutely.
You want me to do it? I got you, yeah.
And y'all tricked me by putting it behind me, so. Hey, everybody. My name is Vanessa Maria. You can call me V or Vanessa for short. I live in the area and I have been working as a radio producer, multimedia producer for over 20 years now. And I started out working in commercial radio. So I worked for Power 99, was my first gig, and worked in commercial radio and then did news for a long time. When I came back to live here, I worked at the Hispanic Family Center with Alicia over there, that's my homie, and I was the communications director. So a big part of my job was getting information to the community and doing so in English and in Spanish because one of the biggest barriers for the Latino population here was getting information in Spanish. Since then, I've been a huge advocate for language access and trying to find more Latino journalists. So I'm on the board of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the Philly chapter, but a lot of the Philly journalists cover South Jersey, so we're all kind of working together. I've been working at Free Press for 2 years now, but I've been collaborating with Mike for a long time. Before that, I worked at Philly Cam. I co-founded a community radio station, WPPM 106.5 FM, and our signal reaches Camden, so we have quite a few radio producers that came over from South Jersey. But that begged the question, why are so many people from all over South Jersey having to go all the way to Philly just to have a platform to tell their story, to highlight all the good things that are happening? And so since then, we've been organizing together, not just in South Jersey, but across the state, to understand why this problem exists, why there's a local news crisis, why we are not represented in media, and why there are no resources, because New Jersey has a lot of money, right? And we've seen a lot of money wasted and mismanaged as well by the state. So we're really thrilled to tell you about the Civic Information Consortium, which was created after a bill that Free Press helped pass in 2018. And that is an organization now that is specifically created to fund local journalism in New Jersey. And in this last fiscal budget, which was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor on June 30th, they allocated $4 million for local journalism projects in New Jersey, which is exciting. And yeah, from our point of view, we've like liberated the funds, right? Because there's a lot of wasteful spending, a lot of pay to play. And so for us to take back that money and put it into local journalism projects is a really big deal. We've been collaborating with the Center for Cooperative Media to help train people and provide resources. One of the things that we did at Philly Cam was, we take regular people with no media skills or experience, and we turn them into storytellers, filmmakers, TV and radio producers. And
I worked on my first film last summer.
Wow.
And yes, inspired by my friend over here, Alicia, who's been in lots of films. And it was a short film, it was only 3 minutes, and it was about, it's called Misinformation, it was about how misinformation spreads. And we won a Hometown Media Award, and so, yeah. And I'm 41, so you know, it's never too late to learn how to do something new, and I hope to keep making short films like that. But I say that to inspire all of you that anybody can tell their story, anybody can interview and talk to people and get someone else's story, and we all have the capacity to provide information, and that's really what's been happening in Camden, is that information is flowing, but not through traditional news networks. It's flowing through social media platforms, newsletters, email lists. I know of all places, like the prosecutor's office, Angel Osorio puts out a really great newsletter through email that has a list of resources. And there's many other ways in which information is flowing. So what we're trying to do is find all those people who are putting out information to their community, people who are telling stories through art, through poetry, through photography, and to find people, especially younger people, who want to develop those skills. And now that we've liberated some funds, now we can actually pay people and give them the resources to do that. So that's kind of, this is a movement, right? Like what we're doing is we're not just trying to, you know, tell stories and create media. We want to educate people, inform and empower them to change their circumstances and live their best lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're here, we're part of a movement to take back the media and to reframe the message because it's really negative. And in, you know, not to get into politics, but you know, we're also trying to dismantle systems of oppression, of white supremacy, that's used through media against us and our communities.
Always has been.
Right. So part of that, right, is like using media in the same ways that they do, right? And we want to take those messages, we want to reframe them, and we want to give people information that they need to succeed. So that's my rant. Now do the presentation. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But I'm very passionate. I am very passionate about this work, and this is why I do it. Because as a Latina, you know, again, all Latinos are not the same, and there's a lot of very negative images about our community, and oftentimes, especially people who are newly coming to the United States, they don't get information in their language. So that is what inspires me. So what does the information need? So information needs are, well, before that, I'm gonna ask a question. How many people during the height of the pandemic, like when stuff was first happening in March, had trouble finding information? Raise your hand. Yeah, me too. I was like, what is a coronavirus, right? Like, what is that? It took me weeks to understand, especially as a journalist, right? I was like, how do we report on this? Then it was like, how do we get tests? Like, I know I thought I had COVID like several times, right? I was like, oh my God, I have a fever, right? We had to know the symptoms. We had to find the tests. We couldn't find testing. Then it was about the vaccine, a lot of questions about the vaccine, who can get vaccinated when. Then it was the booster shot. It's always questions, especially related to public health. And it's very frustrating when you can't get your questions answered, right? So you Google it, you ask people, and nobody seems to know. And so information need is not just something that's fun to know about, but it's something that you're trying to access, but you have a barrier, right? And not only that, you're having trouble understanding the information or trusting the information. So this project really started out as a pandemic project. And so that's why we went to Atlantic City and Newark, and we wanted to work in Camden to help people better access information during that time. So last year we worked with an organization called Outlier Media, and they would be here, but they're based out of Detroit. So because this is not a virtual event, I'm gonna be sharing the report on their behalf. And what we did was we put out a text message survey to 47 people during a 3-day period, and they answered a series of questions through text message. Then they also accessed 211 data from Camden. They looked at the 911 calls, and they also looked at the complaints that were sent to the city. And then finally, they looked at the census data. And through all of those ways, they assembled this report right here, which we'll put on the center's website. And if you signed in or signed up for this event, we'll send it to you in a link if you want to read it in its entirety. But I've summarized it for you here. So if you want to go to the next slide. So the first thing, and even though this data is a year old, I don't think anything has changed because of inflation, because of the high number of evictions and displacement that's happening in our communities. The number one thing people wanted to know about was money. They literally texted back, I need money. How do I get money? Where is the money at? And so that tells us that people need financial assistance. People also asked about how to get food. And unemployment resources, finding jobs and getting unemployment, and also utilities and transportation. Through the 211 data, the number one thing that people called 211 about was help for paying for bills and utilities, but specifically electric bill. Because you know, the electric bill is high in the wintertime. A lot of people want to access LIHEAP, which is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and don't know how to. The 911 calls showed that most of the calls were for non-emergency items. People asking all types of questions. But the number one emergency thing that people asked was they wanted the police to come to mediate some type of conflict that was happening. The city complaints. So the number one thing people complained to the city about was abandoned and vacant properties, trash, roads, property tax collection. So you know the potholes.
I'm complaining about it right now.
Right.
I got a jungle next door to me.
Exactly. The weeds and stuff was one of the big complaints. And so several years ago, I served on the District Council Cooperative Board for District 3, East Camden. And that this is literally every month people came to complain about abandoned cars, abandoned homes, overgrown lots. And so this is a recurring problem in Camden, right? I served on that board 10 years ago. So to see, I'm like, dang, it's still dealing with that again. One of the other things that they looked into was who owns property here. So it should be no surprise that most people rent properties here. There's not a high number of home ownership. So then they looked at tax collection, and the people who are the biggest offenders for evading taxes are owners of commercial properties. So it's not homeowners, right? It's these other people, businesses. And what happens when we don't collect property taxes? We can't pay for things like the roads and the trash removal, etc. So that's something they also said that we should look into. The difference between breaking news and reporting on information needs is that it's not like a one-time thing, right? Like we're not just saying, oh, hey, here's how do you apply to this thing, but it's also following up with people and seeing how well they were able to access that service. And then seeing, hey, there's a LIHEAP program, no one's getting into the LIHEAP program, what's going on? How many LIHEAP providers are there? You're doing additional follow-up work to see why people are able to access the program, like what's successful and why they're not accessing something. And then you look at the city level and the state level. So it's not just about telling people where to get items, but understanding why people aren't able to access resources. And that's the whole part of journalism that I love, which is holding people in power accountable. And we definitely don't do enough of that in Camden. And so that's a little, again, our Nuanced Cafe, the nuance to that is that, again, it's not just publishing a list of links and this is how you get stuff, but doing that additional follow-up work with people. Oh no. You don't want me calling your ex during your presentation. That was like, just kidding. So the way that we can measure information needs is the various ways I've listed here. So we did a survey. The survey we did through text message. I use Google Voice, which is a free service, to respond to people. because they said they needed all these things. And so my job was then to respond to them and give them information and ask them if they were able to access it. You can also do online surveys. Google Forms, SurveyMonkey is free. You can call people on the phone and you can do in-person surveys. So in 2020, I did a lot of voter outreach and I did in-person surveys with a clipboard asking people if they knew where their voting location was, if they knew what the ballot initiative questions were, if they knew how to send in their mail-in ballot. And so the only way I was able to reach some of the most vulnerable populations, like older people, people that don't speak English, people who have visual disabilities, like I can't even tell you how many people told me they couldn't find stuff because their phone screen was cracked. And I was like, oh, again, these are things that you would notice when you're out there in the streets, you're talking to people in person. And a lot of the older people, their glasses were old. They couldn't see the small print on their phones. So that led us to advocacy around making the information more accessible to mobile phones and putting things in bigger print and putting things in different languages. Also one-on-one conversations. So a lot of you are affiliated with other organizations, other communities. You know, Camden is kind of small, everybody knows each other. So, you know, you have to get on those phones and start talking to people. If you need someone that leads an after-school program, or somebody who's a pastor, or somebody that does social services as a case manager, ask them what they're seeing. You know, tell them ask them what their clients, or their patients, whoever they're interacting, ask them what are their biggest questions. Partnering with local organizations. So you can do events with people where you are asking them, you know, to give you feedback. There's social media engagement. Alicia's really good at this, asking these questions, right? I think you asked the question was like, what's your biggest question? And I think I asked something about money. It was like, how do I get more money? No, I think I asked, how do I invest small amounts of money, right? Like in stocks or something, because I bought stocks on Cash App and it's like not a good idea. But you know, I wanted to get in with the GameStop stuff. I had no idea what I was doing. So yeah, ask people on social media, what are your biggest questions? You know, research available data. So the good news is we FOIA requested this information in Newark and Atlantic City, and it took forever to get back. And we kind of thought, like, what's going on here? In Camden, we got all the information right away. So in this report, it even says we had no problems getting this information from Camden, which means y'all can get it too. So the center and also there's other organizations that can provide you assistance with filling out an OPRA form. That's an Open Public Records Request. It's super easy, but you can get the 911 data from this year. You can get the 211 data, etc. And then listening sessions instead of listening sessions. So you can get together a group of people just like this, and you can ask them what do you want to know about? What are the stories that you think need highlighted? What needs an investigation? What are the ways that we can celebrate Camden? So that brings me to the next slide, which is our hierarchy of information needs. Once you start surveying people and asking them, you're going to get all kinds of stuff back, right? People are going to tell you some pretty weird stuff. People are going to tell you stuff that's very interesting. And what to do with that, you want to kind of categorize it. And we use what's called the hierarchy of information needs. And when we do this is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is very simple. If your basic needs aren't met, you really can't do anything. So we need food, we need shelter, we need health care. And if you do community organizing, you know you can't activate people, you can't get them to vote, you can't get them to do stuff if they don't have housing, right? So we work to get people's basic needs first before that they can move up. Then there's safety needs, social needs, esteem, self-actualization. So this is an activity we did in Newark, and at the bottom you'll see food, water, clothing, utilities, jobs, healthcare, accessibility, etc. And so the things that we're concerned most about are these core needs, like finding housing, food, healthcare, and employment. And that's reflected here, right? In the survey, that's what people said they needed the most information about. So, connecting this to this idea of restorative narrative, right? As we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of negative stories and images about people in Camden, but we know better, right? We know that there's amazing things here, there's amazing art and music, and there's a lot of people who have solutions to the problems that we mentioned, and they're already working on them. So this is defined as stories of recovery, restoration, and resilience in the aftermath or midst of difficult times. So we kind of in some difficult times right now, to put it mildly, especially, with the global pandemic and inflation and, we're still dealing with racist, violent police. There's just a lot going on right now. The other thing to note is that, when we are recovering or we're trying to solve these problems, it's a process, right? Rebuilding happens over time. Reporting on restorative narrative takes time. It's not a one-time interview or photo shoot. This is the thing that really makes me mad about crime coverage on TV. You see somebody maybe was shot and killed. They do one story. There's no follow-up. We don't know if a suspect was ever apprehended. We don't know if a suspect was falsely charged. We don't know the impact on the family, the victim. We don't know if they go to trial. It's just one story and that's it. And that is not a good way to report on those types of events. And so we're not trying to replicate what the mainstream media does, right? We want to connect with people, build relationships with them over time, and follow through with the work. So this includes reporting beyond the immediacy of the news, and being able to report on meaningful progress requires a long-term commitment from both journalists and media organizations. And so this project is meant to springboard you into a longer relationship building process with community members, with community leaders, and with other media makers so that we can all work together to document solutions, recovery, resilience, and just other positive things that are happening in Camden. Because one of the things that I've heard from the most in these community listening sessions is they never show the people in the community actively working to address these issues and having some success with it. Yeah. And so that's what we want to pull those stories out, because the news media presents it like, oh my gosh, like, we don't know why this is happening, like there's no solutions. And that's why people think it's like a crazy place here. And that's just simply not true. And so the more that we can show that there are many good people invested in Camden, people who are lifers, right? They're not leaving, they're staying here to rebuild it, to make it better, and to teach future generations, I think the better off we'll be in creating a more positive image of our community. So I hope you'll join us in this movement and get this money.
That part, and the part about, they don't show the work, that's me.
No, you're good. Go for it.
I also like the point about immediacy. Even because we dealt with this when we had our protests. Even after we did it, like people came out and they marched with us. We had a list of demands we handed to Kansas City Police, and then like a bunch of the people in my peer group afterwards was like, all right, well that's cool. Racism is defeated. I'm gonna go home now.
No.
And it's just like not how it works. It's always a process.
Everyday fight.
But on the topic of restorative narrative, we're blessed here in Camden, New Jersey to have a local creator known as Aaron James Montgomery. It's actually Eric's work that's currently neighboring you on all of his walls here in Nuanced. And so Eric's work focuses a lot on literally reframing Camden in a new light, is a good example of restorative narrative. But for a little bit more about Eric and the work that he does, I'm going to hand the clicker off to my good friend Dave Merrill here.
Is there more slides?
Yeah, you just get the one slide. I gave you 3 pictures. So.
I don't need to click it. Oh, right. Wait, do I need
The clicker is a symbol of power. You have to.
Oh,
okay. It's a magic wand.
Do I have to sit down?
You can do whatever you want. This is your space, sir.
Yeah.
But for the people that don't know you, tell them who you are, what you do.
No,
You're professional. You know what's up.
Hi, everybody. Reed, thanks for having me. My name is Ian Demuro, president of Moja. Reed and I are like Batman and Batman. We're gonna be sidekicks here. So we've done a thing in 2020 with the Camden Police Department. Done a bunch of cool stuff in Kenya, Guatemala, Haiti, DR. Yeah, so that's why I'm not here to talk about that, but we're talking about Eric James Montgomery, which is like, he has a really strong name, so like anything.
You have to say the whole thing.
You have to say the whole thing, you just can't say Eric, you have to say Eric James Montgomery. Because, yeah, you have to respect his name. No, so he has an EJM Foundation, which is an amazing foundation that gets young adults and children through the process of creating photography as a form of public art. And through that, they're able to build self-esteem, work through personal issues, and that also transfers into their everyday life and school life, trying to figure out how to best mediate their emotions and also increase their grades in school, which is amazing. Currently, right now, he's in South Africa, Johannesburg, and he's working in a school where he's working with kids that were born with HIV and AIDS, and right now he's teaching them photography, which is an amazing thing. Because he's been there for 2.5 weeks, so he's there for 3 week period. And on top of that, he also works at Rutgers Future Scholars, where Reed and I also work. So the cool thing he's doing right now is that he's creating pen piles between the people from his students in South Africa to his students in Camden, which is really powerful work. Like Reed said, Eric James Montgomery. He has a lot of different mediums in his artwork. The one that I love the most is his red, white, blue, and blue that you'll see here, showing contemporary pictures of different hypocrisies in America and also the sadness, struggle, and horrors in America. The second one I love is his one is here. Yes, this one here, where he talks about Reframing Camden, which is an amazing thing that connects to the work that Reed's doing. And while we're here, he takes residents of the city, he photographs them in a high esteem, strong stance of photo, and then they're able to use one word that describes what Camden means to them. So it was something like this, and then if you're around Camden, you've seen them on Broadway, Haddon Avenue, right here. Reed's face is on Kane Avenue, I think.
Your face is right next to it.
My face is next to it too, but yeah, so let's say Camden is, and then Victorious, beautiful, Ubuntu, all those things. So this is the kind of work that really creates a sacred space for artists to come and really share what their community looks like, what their space is supposed to be. And Eric, although he's not originally from Camden, he's one of those artists in Camden that really embodies what the city means and what it can be. And when you're able to give artists the power to decide for themselves what a space looks like, that's a wonderful thing to do. So I don't want to be here all day and talk your ears off, but that's my time.
Appreciate you. And that takes us into a brief intermission. Please take 10 minutes to, decompress, get around, label some, and we'll come back with some more information with you in just a little bit. Who are picked as selected winners and fellows for this round receive thorough constructive criticism on how they can better structure their project so they can get it next time around. Did you have something more? If not, we're at the Q&A session.
I just want to open it up for questions from the audience. Any questions about the application process? Anything else we want to discuss?
That's all I need.
It could. I'm okay. I think I answered my own question, but my question was basically, so any form of art we could do for stories. Like, could we incorporate, like, let's say if I wanted to do spoken word, could I incorporate visual art with my spoken word, like kind of like someone acting in the background? Like, I don't know, can I do that?
So we have to make sure that it can fit into the guidelines what we're going for, because again, there's a whole thing for how this relates to Camden's needs as an information hub, how it reflects the needs of the people, and then also making sure that it's part of a restorative narrative.
Definitely.
So long as
as long as it fits within, okay.
You make
yeah,
the case
perfect.
for it, you make the case for it, we'll work with you on it, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
And think of it more like as maybe like a community event, right?
Yes.
Like where they could do a spoken word and you could showcase art. I think that would be like something ideal, right? Where you can involve the community and bring them into the space to connect with your project.
Absolutely.
An idea that another friend of mine pitched. She unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but I thought it was really cool. You know that super long mural that runs along in Camden? It's got like
Yeah, Money from the King.
exactly that one. She wanted to get together a project and get artists out there to not only recover the mural, so it's like refreshed and refurbished, but to also have a conversation with the residents in the neighborhood, reflecting on how the decline in the mural's art has reflected declines of certain things in the city. You see that way, like the art is
Right,
interwoven with the
intertwined
narrative.
with the actual project, right?
Yeah, there's so many ways to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime you can bring in more members of the community to be a part of that, that's usually a good path to start there.
Two other examples is like some like other journalism projects have done like plays. Like they will take stories in the news and we'll make a dramatic play out of it.
Yeah, that's
There's comedy shows.
There's
too.
been comedy shows, like you make jokes about the news. Like those are ways that you could like
The big thing
be
is
very
information.
creative.
Yes.
Yeah.
As long as the big thing is that it's meeting an identified community information need.
Right.
Right.
It's not just something that you come up with. This is something that you have gone through process to identify, source, and solicit these needs from people, and then work that in a way however you want. You know, whatever format it takes is up to you. But as long as it's serving the people of Camden and restoring the narratives as we discussed, then it's wide open. So
You also have the coaching of this entire staff around you to help reshape your idea into a form that best fits what we're looking for.
Yeah, I'll also just say that Philly Cam is like right across the way. So for folks that don't have access to a studio or equipment, we do have a public access center with a very cheap membership where you could go to utilize the studio. You know, because if you're like, oh, I want to interview people, but I don't have a place or I don't have a camera. You know, the classes are only 6 weeks long, so you could realistically learn how to use a nice camera and have a space. But really, you could do so much with just your smartphone nowadays, right? And even like connecting a microphone to your smartphone, which is what I do when I do street reporting. But just know if there are things related to that where you're like, I have this idea, but I don't know if I have the equipment or the space, like let us know, and we'll even try to find places here in Camden if getting to Philly is going to be a barrier for you. There's other places here like Idea, which is a couple doors down, where we can help facilitate a spot for you to do interviews and to record and things like that.
yeah, there's a part of the application, and on the website there's a frequently asked questions, which goes into things like what can I spend the money on? Training and resources and equipment is one of them. So if you build that into the budget, and we're asking for like a rough budget, basically, it's $5,000. It's not a fortune. It's, you know, just break down what you plan to spend on, work that into your budget, and it's totally fair to say, hey, I need to, spend like $300-400 to upgrade my camera, or I need to get a tripod, or I need to do a class as part of like the professional development aspect of that. 100% on above board. That's on the table. You can go for that too. So think about that in your budget and how you want to spend the money. It's about building capacity. Remember that. It's about building capacity, building power, and telling restorative narratives that meet community information needs.
Yeah, try to think of other costs too. Like if you're gonna get a website maybe, and you need money to pay for the website hosting and the domain name. If you're working with video or audio, maybe you need to work with an editor. You might want to pay for an editor to work with you to help finish. Because I can edit, but I'm not really good at it. So I like to work with an editor. I like to film and direct my shoots, but working with an editor is really helpful. So also think about people in your network that could assist you. Maybe you're setting up a photo shoot or something, but you're going to need an assistant for that day. So just try to think of all of the things that will take to help you finish the project, because that's really important, is to have a final project that we can share with the community. And then also, collaborating with people. There might even be people in this room that you can work with. Maybe you can even put your ideas together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Vanessa and Joe. We had a good discussion about all the resources that, would be available to you to apply. So we'll take advantage of that.
We did have a hand.
Just, what is the timeline for the project from start to completion? If you're awarded the grant, when should we be approximately done with that?
We're thinking a 3-month production window.
3 months.
It's funny how the 3 months changes because we were technically supposed to be in the middle of it right now, and here we are opening it up today. So it's 3-month production window ideally. So that would take us from when the applications close middle of August to about the middle of November.
Yeah, not a super hard date, but
Yeah.
wanted to give you guidelines to work within so you know the benchmarks to hit. So, yeah, but we'll work with you if there's challenges. We are technically still in the middle of the pandemic, so.
Things happen. We couldn't open Instagram today, so
Yeah,
things happen
there are tragedies out
unexpectedly. Then any other questions, comments, observations? We are here for y'all right now.
Is this just for creators?
Nope. Anybody wants to tell stories about Camden?
Stories Invincible.
Yes.
And the idea is to speak to Camden or stories about the city, is that correct?
Yes, as media often misrepresents places, just like Camden and Camden especially, we want to talk to the residents so they can tell their stories in an authentic way.
Let me just give an example. Jamal here is an accountant. That's Jamal.
Hi, Jamal.
Hi, Jamal.
The story is about the need for creatives to make sure that they have their business, financial stuff in order and have a program or a process in which to make that happen. Is he eligible to apply for this, or to do something like that, to get that story out about the success and the importance?
There's definitely enough pieces there to work with. We have a black accountant in a city that is historically financially troubled, so there's something compelling in there within itself. And then we also have the information needs that we've gathered before. Going the wrong way. Information needs to be gathered before in terms of what people need. Like Vanessa mentioned, people were calling 911 saying, "I'm financially strapped." So a story like Jamal's could definitely be the foundation for something larger. And who knows if it turns
Okay, what's
into
the
that.
biggest question people ask you, like as an accountant? Like what are some financial literacy needs? What are the ways people can get into that field as a career? Think along those lines. I mean, just sharing your knowledge is going to go a long way. Because under financial literacy, there's so much. And I see your chair says my accountant is black, but how can we get more black accountants in Camden, right? Like there's that as well. But as I said, we don't have to have a background in media to do this work. We're trying to give access to media to anybody who wants to tell their story and be part of this project. And like I said, if you're willing to learn, there's many tools and resources out there for you to just start out and try something like this. But most people are already content creators. If you have a social media account and you post and you take pictures, then you're already doing it.
I mean, I've heard, the makings of a good, compelling case for a grant here. And as Joe said, it goes to building capacity, right? So you're talking about helping to improve financial literacy for artists and storytellers. So there you go. I encourage you to apply.
I also talked about the commercial business owners not paying their taxes, right? So how can we give them a roadmap for small businesses to pay taxes?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting point, especially because we were talking about like not residential but commercial. But I do think that some of the business owners are also like residents too. So it's important to note that, because I didn't know whether you were saying that to knock business owners, but I still think that there's a financial literacy piece, and a lot of people who are residents, they go to set up shop in Camden, and they still need help with like payroll taxes and sales and use, all of those other things. And that's where having a tax preparer or someone who's aware of the codes is important, because Camden's a hub zone and a UEZ, so like urban enterprise zone. So you do qualify for like tax incentives just by opening up shop in Camden, and it makes it like a really great place to do business. Really, it's like a tax advantage, especially if you collect sales tax. So That was something.
There's a story, right?
So you're applying, right?
In that, there's a narrative for Camden business owners.
Well,
In general, for advertisement, because I feel like there's businesses here, but they don't really get advertised.
Yeah.
Like they do it on their own. The most I see is like social media. Like, but social media is like just one thing. Like if big media platforms or multimedia organizations are pushing their businesses, that's the businesses in Camden, that's more business to them, and also it inspires the young generation coming up that they can do it too. Right. But they won't know if it's not in the media.
So we have this set up on the website. We have you can go to the website storiesinvincible.org or .com, and under the grants menu option at the top, you'll get all the grant eligibility criteria, what kind of stories, what kind of projects we're looking for, what kind of and a frequently asked questions list. So everything like I mentioned before, from what can I spend the money on to can I apply as a team, can I apply for multiple projects, all that stuff. And if you, and I urge you to do this even if you don't have additional questions, you can click the button that says schedule a time. I think I have to enable it, so it'll be there tonight at the latest. But you can schedule at any time that's available on the little calendar there. You click it, you can schedule a 30-minute session with anyone up on the stage, myself, Cassandra, or Reed. Or if you'd like to add additional people, we can try to work behind the scenes and get a 30-minute window. And you can technically do as many of those as you want within a certain range. But yeah, take advantage of that, because even if you just want to, spitball some ideas, go over them, set up a time, set up a little session. It's free, it's quick, and it'll give you a better understanding, or one-on-one understanding, so we can go over some of the ideas you might have directly and in a personal setting.
You guys can always come in here.
There you go.
I think that's a great idea from a business perspective. The gentleman in the green, I don't recall your name.
Brandon.
Brandon?
Yeah.
That Brandon mentioned about small businesses in the city of Camden that need to have multi-layered marketing programs, exposure. And I think that is so key. So when you talk about partnering and doing some things, it's not necessarily that creative, artistic things that you see on the wall or the anime with reading some of the other photographers and other creatives that are in the room that are in the arts. I think that that's fundamental. And if your current program doesn't do that, maybe that's something for consideration for some future funding that would be helpful and more substantial. Because at the end of the day, we all need to find a way to stand up our business. Because whether you're a single or sole member business proprietor entrepreneur, you still have to understand how to stand up your business to sustain. So I just think that what you guys are doing is great. But if that doesn't fit into the current model, maybe that's something for the future for consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we
I
have
think it's all just in how you do it, because one of the projects we had in Newark was a woman who was visually impaired who wanted to feature different resources that people could access. She did an online resource fair that was over 1 week, where she featured people from all across Newark that offered resources to people with disabilities. It was like a disabilities online fair. So it wasn't artistic, there was no photography. And she was like, I'm not a writer or journalist, but the disabilities community is neglected during this time and they need resources. And I know a lot of people. And so she worked with somebody to set up an online portal where then she could bring all of her contacts and people could, throughout that week access the resources. So it's, it's really about information and connecting people. And so when it comes to, if business owners are your audience, you should certainly connect with business owners, like I said, crowdsource from them, ask them what their biggest information needs are. Like, hey, what are your biggest questions? And then from that, you can figure out the way in which to present that information. It could be an event, it could be a website, it could be blog posts, it could be an Instagram campaign where you feature different business owners from Camden. It could be connecting with the university or the Chamber of Commerce to offer resources and information. It's all within the umbrella of meeting information needs. I think it's a range, right, from people who are just publishing, like I said, a newsletter, like this is for the donation food drop-off, for people doing more artistic projects like photography and theater and spoken word. But as long as you are connecting with the community and providing some type of resource or service to them that's useful to them, and or reframing the narrative to something positive and inclusive, it all kind of fits within this. And just remember, this is like a very short window of time, so it can be part of a larger project, right? So this is just like a springboard.
Yes.
And even for people that aren't ready, you're like, I don't really have my stuff together right now. I still want people to connect with us because we're still here to plant those seeds. And you might be ready in 6 months or even next year, but you know this is a cohort and a network of support. We're not all on the same timeline. You might be like, oh, I'm starting school in September. I'm not going to be able to do that right now. But I think still connecting and getting in the loop is going to help you at a later point whenever you're ready.
Yeah. It also doesn't have to be a new thing, by the way. This can be a branch of an ongoing project. In the application, you have to select whether this is a new or an ongoing thing. If you're doing work that fits these parameters, and you want to say need $5,000 to expand a particular neighborhood and do something with this group, right? Totally on the table as well. You don't have to just come up with a brand new idea and try to launch it and have it finished in 3 months. That's not what we're trying to do here.
For example, Brandon's over there on the phone right now, but his project, Lights of Camden, is almost like Humans of New York, if you're familiar with that, but it's in Camden. He takes pictures of people, he gets their stories, puts it right there. I invited him personally because he already fits the criteria of what it is that we're looking for. So you would be surprised what applies. Do not be afraid to share this with people. I tried to tell people, hey, we're giving away money to talk about the city you live in. And apparently that wasn't enough of an incentive. I'll have to figure out what we have to say next time. But please do share the word. We have all this money to give away to support people to do the things that people want to do. I know people every day don't hear people say, hey, I want to make your dreams come true. But when you hear it, that's a call you have to come and answer to. So please do spread the word on this. We're going to be open until the middle of August. And we'd love to see what ideas people come up with.
Let's go.
Huh? Until August 18th.
Yeah.
From tonight until the 18th.
Oh, it's open.
It starts tonight.
It's open right now. The link's
Yes.
on the website. Yep, that's right. One more round of applause for Rosemary and Nuanced.